may not know this, but she's not just the Vice President of the United States, she's also the chair of the National Space Council. So she oversees the entire nation's space programs and efforts, whether we're talking about NASA, military, Earth observation for climate, all different types of things here. And she wanted to appreciate the work that you've done. And I want to read a letter that she has signed. There's a letter right there with her signature right at the bottom. And it says, "Dear Captain Glover, I send you my warmest congratulations on your historic achievement as the first African-American man to complete a long-duration mission on the International Space Station." And you heard he was up there for 6 months. I'm grateful we had the chance to speak last year while you were aboard the space station. So she actually did call him on board the International Space Station. Through your career of service as an officer in the United States Navy and as an astronaut, you have blazed new trails and served our nation admirably. And through your engagement with our nation's youth at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, you encourage and inspire the next generation of explorers. It's you all. As we embark on the Artemis program to return to the moon and onto Mars, your contributions to what we know about living and working in space will be crucial. You represent the best of who we are as a country, and I hope you take the tremendous pride in this accomplishment. I join your family, friends, and our country in celebrating you today. Sincerely, Kamala Harris.
Wow. I love this place, but I love it even more now that you're all here. So thank you for coming today. And to all the teachers and parents, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Thank you for bringing all these students. Thank you. Give yourself a round of applause. I really appreciate and respect the time that we get to spend together. And I have children. I've got 4 daughters. One in middle school, 2 in high school, and 1 in college. If I let my hair grow out, you can see the gray hair. I've got an adult child. And so I really think a lot about who they interact with, who they speak to, and so I take this very seriously. The fact that you get to be here with me and I get to share some time with you is very special to me. And so I'm just grateful for you allowing me this time to share a little bit about my journey with you. So, without further ado, we are going to get started. And so, I'm first going to make an adjustment here because I want you to hear this as well as see it, and I want to make sure when we have audio. Here is for you all to maybe find some things in these stories that you can connect with and that you can take with you and keep with you. Remember, you know what, he dealt with that, he overcame that, and he used that to help him get further along on his journey and chase down and catch a couple of his own dreams, and to know that you can do the same. Okay? Can you do that? Can you all do that? All right. Okay, perfect. So, start with a question. There are questions today. I might give you a pop quiz at the end of this, so pay attention. You might want to take some notes. No, you don't have to take notes. But I want to start with one question. I like to ask kids this because I'm doing some statistics here. So, what do you want to be when you grow up? If you know what you want to be, raise your hand. Oh, that's pretty good. That's a lot of you. Sign this kid up. There's some people here from NASA. Sign. What is your name? Ezra? Oh, I hope you become a pilot. And you know what? I hadn't flown before I started my career, and so it's possible. No matter where you start, it's totally possible. And you want to go to space? Oh, we need to talk about this question. Okay, for those of you who don't know, okay, everybody put your hands down. If you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, raise your hand. Be honest, because I'm going to raise my hand in this category too. Even though I am a grown-up, you know, I'm standing up here wearing my blue pajamas in front of you. But one of the things I love about my job is that it's a lot of different things, and so I haven't really had to choose. I get all kind of cool stuff, and I'll tell you a little bit. So it's almost half. It's almost half. So I will tell you, when I ask this question, I ask it a lot, and I have found about half the students know, and a lot of times they say astronaut, maybe just because I'm here, they don't want me to feel bad. So I put a little more percentage on the side where this is the most common answer that I actually get. It is that I don't know. And you know what? If that's the category that you're in, that's why I raised my hand. Because when I was your age, I couldn't tell you clearly, I mean, I want to be a stuntman, a fireman, a police officer like my father. And then I saw this amazing thing launched to space on the news, and I thought, I want to drive a space shuttle. But I didn't know. But that's okay. Some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today, you're going to see some themes, and a couple of those themes are what I really want you to take away from this. So, and here's what you can be. Even if you don't know what you want to do for work, these are things that you can do in your life that will help you accomplish your dreams. And number one is to be resilient. I used to use the word be gritty, but we named our spacecraft Resilience, and so I use the word resilient. And I'll come back and explain to you what that means, but repeat that one after me. Be resilient. Be resilient. If you don't know what it is, I'll explain later. Don't let me walk off without telling you what that means. Number two, repeat after me. Be a lifelong learner. Be a lifelong learner. And number three, maybe the most important, be a good teammate. Be a good teammate. Yes, being good to each other. Okay, so remember those things. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stories that some things that I've been through, but I really am sharing this with you for you to find some things in it that you can hold on to it and walk away with it and keep in your pocket when you maybe come face to face with some challenges, okay? So, I am from Southern California. I was born in Pomona. My father was a Pomona police officer, and I lived with my mom most of my childhood. My mom visit my dad, and I love showing this picture just because that's when I had hair like all of y'all. I just have to look at that picture. I don't have it anymore. But growing up in Southern California, I loved things like my dad was a police officer. I loved fire trucks and race cars. I told you I wanted to be a stuntman and a fireman and a policeman. I didn't really know much about aviation, so I couldn't have said it like, tell me your name again. Ezra. I didn't have the wherewithal to say I wanted to be a pilot. But when I saw rocket launches on TV and I saw airplanes in movies, I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And so I've always loved machines, especially ones that make a lot of noise and go fast. And I've also always loved sports. And so those are some things that are going to come up as I tell you some of my stories. So I'm going to tell you one story about 5th grade. In 5th grade, I had a teacher named Mr. Hargrove. Any of you in the 5th grade? If you're in the 5th grade, raise your hand. 5th grade was a really good grade for me. You like it? 5th grade is pretty good, isn't it? 5th grade is cool. Any 5th grade teachers out there? You listen up too. 4th grade? All the teachers. This is for you too. Mr. Hargrove was my MESA advisor and my science teacher. Now, I've always been a little talkative, if you can't tell. And I was a little talkative in my science class. And Mr. Hargrove pulled me aside one day and he said, you know, I can see the way you interact with these MESA activities. Like we used to build bridges out of popsicle sticks and balsa wood. And we would make cars that were powered by a mousetrap. And it would make it go, and we'd have a competition to see who could go the farthest. And I love that stuff. I told you, I love machines. And he said, you know, if you really work on the science and math, you might make a great engineer one day. And I'm thinking to myself, did you see what just popped up on the screen? Normally there's sound with that, and it makes a big choo-choo train noise. But what was it? Say it again. With driving trains. You see, I didn't know what an engineer was. I didn't have any engineers in my family. Actually, no one in my family had graduated from college at that time. So I didn't know what an engineer was. I thought he meant driving trains. But I'll tell you this, today, I have 3 engineering degrees, and I've been really fortunate to do some really great things in science and technology. And it started with Mr. Hargrove's belief in me. And so I tell that story. Appreciate that. I tell that story for a couple of reasons. One, to tell you how important those people who brought you here are, and you people who brought all these students, your expectations and belief in them is powerful. I'm a living testament to that belief and inspiration. So thank you for your service and keep doing that with these kids. Moving on to high school, I had another teacher, actually a bunch of teachers I could tell you stories about. One of my favorite was my math teacher. And I'll get to that in a minute, but I told you I also love sports. I was a pretty regular kid in high school. I wanted to play football in college. My parents and my teachers all told me I should go to college. And like I said, no one in my family had graduated from college, so I didn't really know what that meant, but I did know that there was college football, and I love football. So I wanted to go to USC, and I wanted to be a Trojan just like Marcus. And I was working on a problem one day. I had a teacher, Mr. And I noticed a pattern. Do you see a shape? What shape do those numbers mean? A triangle. 90 degrees. It's a right triangle too. Good, good. Okay, are you watching this? Okay, so I saw this shape in the numbers, and I realized I could use it to figure out how to add them up. And to find the area of a triangle, you make it into a rectangle and cut it in half. So anyway, long story short, I figured out something. Numbers up. I was in high school, so this may be a little more than the math that you're doing now. But I felt really good about this. And I said, Mr. Robinson, I created a formula. I had a name and everything. There's this really amazing set of formulas in geometry, and one of them is called the Pythagorean theorem. And you'll learn that when you get to high school, especially Elias. But that I already had a name for mine. I was going to call it the Victorian theorem. And he said, open your pre-calculus book, and he flipped a few pages past where we were, and he showed me this equation in the book. And I was like, oh man, I thought I had discovered something. Like, I thought I was the first person to notice this pattern. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'm not going to name it after me. But he said something to me next that changed my life. I was 16. I really thought about college in terms of going to college and play football. And really hadn't thought about what it takes academically to succeed. And so I had questions and doubts. I didn't know if I could do it because I didn't know anybody who had done it successfully yet. And even though my teachers and my parents were amazing in supporting me, I still was just uncertain about how I would do. And Mr. Robinson said something to me right after seeing this. He says, you know what? The fact that you figured that out on your own, though, means you could teach it to your classmates. Why don't you teach that lesson to them? And that day was the first time that I had a little teeny thought that maybe I have what it takes to succeed in college. And that was a really powerful day for me. So I always call Mr. Robinson on. Football. I did get to wrestle in college, but I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I spent 4 years there. Had a great time. Like I said, I played sports. I studied engineering, and I also had a great time going out. And I was in Mesa in 5th grade, and now I got to be a Mesa tutor. And so that picture in the top right there is actually my wife, Diana. And we would go to schools, and this one you see, we're talking about leverage and the power of leverage, but how to make mousetrap cars go farther and faster. And so, but anyway, had a great time in my days at Cal Poly and graduated. That's a picture of my mom and my little brother who just became a father. He's not really little anymore. That was a long time ago. And so after I graduated, I joined the Navy. I actually joined the Navy while I was in college. And if you have some questions to that, some more how that happened. But I joined the Navy and been able to do some really amazing things. I got commissioned in 1999. I got my wings of gold. That's my dad pinning my wings on me in 2001, about 2 years later. And then I pretty amazing, but I think this one is the best one ever. That's a picture of me flying over Iraq, and really interesting time for our country, for me personally. A lot of growth in that tour, but I finished up that tour going to combat and came home and decided I wanted to go to test pilot school. I really thought about going to Top Gun, but I decided at the end that I was going to go to test pilot school, do something technical. And I got to go and study how airplanes work. That's me in a glider doing test maneuvers with one of my classmates. And then while I was in test pilot school, I got to start on a master's degree, and I got to finish some formal education and schooling. And so that was a really special day when I graduated from Naval Postgraduate School. And then I would go back to the fleet. That's what we call the Navy, in the Navy. I went back to the fleet, and this is a really special day. I moved my family to Japan, and we lived in Japan, and then I would deploy from Japan on a carrier. And that's an aircraft carrier. If you go to the Air and Space Museum, you'll see parts of one of those too. And so this is actually me landing on an aircraft carrier. And at the time, I didn't know this. This was just a cool picture that a friend took for me. But it turns out that was the last time I would ever get to do that. And so that's actually a Super Hornet, which is an improvement over the previous one that I showed you, a little bit newer. But that was the last time I got to land on a carrier. And I love doing it. That was a really special time in life. But it was the last time because I left there and I actually moved here to Washington, D.C. And I worked for that gentleman who is no longer with us. That's the late Senator John McCain. And it was amazing. Another one of my heroes, Congressman John Lewis, who is also no longer with us. But being around people like that, it was a really special. In Houston, my kids had to find new schools, and we had to find a new house, and I started training to be an astronaut. And one of the was we have to learn Russian because half of the space station is made by Russian aerospace companies. So that says my name is Victor. You can't read that. It's Меня зовут Victor. It's pretty simple. I speak a little bit of Russian because all of us have to learn Russian because some of us fly to space. We have to be able to read those manuals that are written in Cyrillic, and the buttons in that spacecraft are written in Cyrillic. And so we have to be prepared. And so all of us study Russian, all of the Russian cosmonauts study English, and then the ones that speak other languages like French or Japanese, they have to learn both English and Russian. They have it the toughest. We also have to learn about the International Space Station, this big old machine that is really complicated and made of lots of parts. We have to learn how to fix it. That's my classmate, Andrew Morgan. He's an Army doctor, and I'm a Navy pilot, and we're both fixing the telephone right there. And that's because when you go to space, do you think we can just call somebody if the telephone breaks or the toilet breaks? Do you think we can just call a plumber to come fix it? No, because we're up in space, so we have to fix it ourselves. And so we learn about the International Space Station system, and we also have this really cool robotic arm. Have any of you ever seen our big robotic arm on NASA TV? We have, what? Oh, it is really cool. It's made by the Canadian Space Agency and one of their corporate partners, MBA, and it is a really amazing piece of technology. And we learn to fly it. We say fly it like an airplane because the controls look like an airplane. And so we have to learn. That's a picture of me in Canada learning to fly the robotic arm at the Canadian Space Agency. And so then there's this other piece. Why is there water? We train in this big pool because it can help us simulate weightlessness like we'll be in space. So that's called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, and we put on the same spacesuits that we go to space in. And I love this time lapse because you see, just for me and my classmate Nick to go in there, 2 of us to go in the water, you see it takes a few dozen people to help us get ready. And while we're underwater, there's also a couple of safety divers and a camera diver. There's a big old team that has to help us to successfully and safely do this mission. And that is true of everything in space. It is a team effort. You know, you see astronauts, and I get to come here and talk to you, but I'm here talking to you because of thousands of people all over the world who made our mission possible. And so this time lapse gives you a sense of that. So we learned to spacewalk, and then there's one other thing, that is that we all have to learn to fly in our T-38s. Every astronaut, even if you were a school teacher, an engineer, a scientist, or you were a military pilot, we all have to learn to fly either in the front seat if you're a pilot or the back seat if you were not an aviator before. But we all become qualified crew members in our T-38. And I love the T-38 because it trains us all the things we do as astronauts operationally, but also communication, handling stress, making decisions in challenging, fast-moving situations. Those are all skills we need, and we get to practice all of them in our T-38s. I love flying. So after 2 years of training, I was done with astronaut candidate training, and I got a pin. You probably can't see it from there, but there's a small pin on the center of my wings that you get when you're qualified to be an astronaut. Mine was actually silver. The first high-resolution images from the New Horizons mission, which I think really is an example of that vision, because before this, humans had never seen those bodies up close. You guys know about Pluto? You've heard of Pluto, right? Pluto. They still teach you about Pluto. We don't call it a planet anymore. A Plutoid, a dwarf planet, whatever you want to call it. Pluto is still cool. Pluto is still Pluto. And now we have really cool pictures of Pluto. That was the first high-resolution picture we took of it, though, and I love it because that picture was also taken on the same day. That spacecraft snapped that photo on July 8, 2015. Over astronaut pin on. That's the day we got our pins. So it's a very special day for me for two reasons. And so, a few years later, I got assigned to be a part of a space mission. We had these two spacecraft, the Boeing Starliner and the SpaceX Crew Dragon, that were a part of our new commercial crew program. And Mike Hopkins and I were assigned to fly Walker and JAXA astronaut Soichi Noguchi, my brother that we call the Master. And so that is the group that I went to space with. And if one of the questions you may ask me is, what do I miss about the space station? I miss them. And so we had the privilege of launching from Kennedy. And then we went out to Kennedy Space Center a week before launch, and this is not training. This is now real. We are preparing to go to the rocket, and it was on November 15th, and that's Mike and I looking up at the rocket, and it's nice because we walk out there at daytime, but this is just prior to sunset. And so by the time they were done strapping us in, it had become night. It's now nighttime, and this rocket is so powerful.
Kilometer mark, you then get a gold.
Took in the capsule. After we safely got to space, Mike, my commander, gave me my gold astronaut pin, because once you go to space now, you get a gold astronaut pin.
100 kilometers, congratulations.
We have several different experiments going on inside of the space station, in racks, in different little facilities like our life sciences glove box that we use for biological and life sciences. But we also have experiments that are run on us.
Space to ground 3 for Shannon. We're watching Flame do its thing.
Yeah. Ones that we're doing ourselves with our hands, and even ones that are on me. Sometimes I am the science experiment. And so you get to see a smattering of our different examples of our different science activities on board the International Space Station. One of my favorite experiments I got to do was called food physiology. No, why it was my favorite?
Eating food.
Because they gave me a lot of food to eat. I like to eat. If you don't know anything about me, know that I like to eat. And so I love being a part of food physiology, learning about the ways that more nuts, fish, healthy foods, and vegetables and fruits can help the astronauts' digestive system, their immune system, but also how much they enjoyed having those foods. We also were able to capture several visiting vehicles. That's actually the robotic arm I was telling you that we train on. Soichi and Mike, with Mike's help, Soichi flew the robotic arm to grab that Cygnus spacecraft, and that brings up more science. It brings up clothes and food for the astronauts on board. And I just think that's a beautiful shot. That's a time lapse, so it's moving faster than real time, but that's what the Earth looks like from space. And so you saw the solar array spinning because it's constantly pointing at the sun, and that was our spacecraft there at the bottom. Spacewalks. This is one of the most interesting things on the International Space Station. While I was there over a period of 45 days, about a month and a half, we got to do 5 spacewalks. And I went outside the space station on 4 of those. And this is Shannon getting our suits ready, putting new cameras on, getting the water charged up into our suits. And then this is Soichi and Kate putting Mike and I in the airlock. And doesn't that look cool that people can just float around and you can just move them? That's so cool. I miss being able to fly like that. You know, like Superman, or maybe you're too young to. Iron Man. Who can fly? What characters can fly today in cartoons? Iron Man. Who else? Thor. It was great to be able to fly like those people. I miss that. And that. Look. That's. Did you see that view? Did you guys see that camera view I was telling you about? When you look straight down, you can see the ground. You can see Earth. You know how far it is? It's I wasn't looking down at the ground because I didn't know what that was going to feel like. So when it was the first time I was doing something, I focused on the familiar. I focused on what I knew because I didn't know how I was going to react to all that new stuff. And so I spent some time out there. And actually it was right around this time. It's dark out. You see how it's dark in the back? And in space, dark is real dark. Much darker than night on Earth. It was around this time we had some trouble with under the station by myself in the dark, and I had to throw that that cover out into space. Now don't worry, it is temporary space junk, but it's not going to stay there forever. It's going to come into the atmosphere and then burn up, and then it'll be gone. And so it's not going to come back and be in the way of our space station. So those are some unique things we got to do outside on our spacewalks. Upgrading the solar arrays, finishing our upgrades for batteries. We had new rechargeable batteries put on there, and adding a new antenna to the European laboratory. All really neat things that we got to do. And I told you, I love machines. So going out into space and being able to bolt things together it was a lot of work, but it was fun work. And I told you, and I really miss that. And I don't know if any of you, watch the news or you hear your parents talk about what's going on in the news. There are some really challenging things going on in the world right now. But I'll say this, if you are aware of some of the challenges that are out there in the world right now, I do wish that our countries got get along great. And so it really hurts my heart to know that there's still some real challenges out there in the world, but we've got to deal with them. And that's one of the reasons why I need you all to go to school and learn all that you can, because you're the ones who are going to get us out of this mess. I'm counting on your generation to do a lot better than my generation has done, because we're the ones who got us here, but we need you to get us out, okay? Can you do that? You promise? I heard you. You heard them. All right. Living in space is amazing. Because because if I tried to run on the treadmill without it, I would float away. So we strap ourselves down, and it bungees us down to the treadmill. And I love exercising in space. Was maybe more fun than any other scientific experiment that I did. The machines that we have to use to work out in space are really amazing pieces of engineering, and I love being able to work out in space. We launched in November and landed in May, almost exactly a year ago, in a few days. And so we spent lots of holidays. Christmas, New Year's, Russian New Year. We had a lot of special days, and we had a Christmas decorating challenge with Mission Control, and that's what that was. And that's really special. We had a really amazing time up there, and that is what I missed the most, was just the everyday life. Because even though we work up there, that's our office, it's a laboratory, a manufacturing facility, an outreach facility, and a laboratory. It was also our home while we were on the mission. And then, early in the morning, so that another SpaceX Dragon could come up and dock to the space station and bring our friends on Crew 2. And that was actually really good for us because we got to practice putting on the suit and moving the spacecraft away from the International Space Station, and we relocated it. We had a change of command where Shannon, the first Houston native to command the International Space Station, and we left. It was time for us to go home. So we undocked from the International Space Station, did some depart burns, and got away from the station. And on the way out, we took some really great pictures of the ISS. And then we had our undock, which looks like this at deorbit. And then we we're going so fast, 7,000 meters per second, about 5 miles per second. 5 miles per second. So when we hit the atmosphere, rub your hands together. Take your hands, put them together, and rub. What's happening? What do you feel? What do you feel, though? Yeah, it's making your hands warm, right? Your hands are moving about 30 miles an hour. Stop. You guys are good at following directions. So we were going so fast that the air would just vaporize and would turn into plasma, and then we were out of communications for about a minute. And then we came out of it, we got communication. Those pulled out those 4 big parachutes, and we glided down to a gentle stop in the ocean. Aircraft has landed in the ocean at night since Apollo did it in 1968. I say that because for NASA, that was a really big deal. But look, it didn't seem like a big deal because it went for almost 6 months. And everybody felt great. You see my commander Mike doing his happy dance, and you'll see lots of smiles from the crew. Everybody felt great. We were all healthy. I could stand up, but I was on a boat, and the boat was slowly doing this. And if I didn't have people on each arm, I would have fallen over. That was right when we landed. But this is about we were back with our colleagues and our families. Shannon's happy dance says it all. That was a really great day for us. We had done everything that we set out to do, and now we were back, and we had handed off the ISS to the next crew, and they were up and running and doing a great job. And so that was a very special time for us to be back home. I don't know if any of you have ever heard, there's this thing called the overview effect. Astronauts talk about how their worldview is affected by seeing the Earth from space. And I overlaid, that is a Dragon spacecraft. That's my college advisor and professor. That's my great-grandmother. That's my mother and my little brother. Negro League baseball player, Buck O'Neill. These are all really special people to me. Roy Haynes, an advisor and mentor to me while I was in college. And the thing I want to say, the overview effect is powerful. It is how you see the world and how we're all connected and how we all ride on Earth. It's like one giant spaceship that we share together. Because when you're away from Earth so far, you can see the rest of space, and there's a lot of nothing. There's a lot of empty space out there. There are other planets and other stars, but there's a lot of nothing in between them. And it makes Earth seem even more special. And it's special because of those things, those people that we love. Going to space does one thing. It does different things to astronauts, but it does one thing to everybody. It makes you appreciate the people and the planet that we live on. And I appreciate you all. It's been amazing to just share this mission with you. And so I'm going to bring it back. Remember, I told you the point of me telling you all this stuff is so that you know how you when you grow up. These, I think, are going to help you on the journey of life no matter where you want to end up. And so, we talked about being resilient. Do you know what that means? If you know what resilience means, raise your hand. Good. I'm glad you don't know, so I'm going to explain it to you. These are my words, but I encourage you to go get a dictionary and look it up for yourself. Resilience, hey, has COVID been easy? Has this pandemic been easy on you all? No, it has not been easy on any of us. But have you still been able to be around the people you love? Yeah. Have you been able to go to school? Yeah. Have you been able to play with your friends? Yeah. Have you been able to see them, even if it was over the phone or the screen? Yes? Yeah. So, have you grown throughout that process? Yeah. Even in the face of this pandemic, you still grew. That's resilience. It means when you're faced with a challenge, you don't just get through it. It's important to know how to do that. But you can actually get better because of the challenges. And so that's what it is. It's about working hard, not quitting when you face obstacles. And you know what the biggest obstacle you'll ever face in life is? Anybody guess? What do you think it is? Life. Did somebody say life? Life can be challenging, but it's the biggest challenge when you decide it's too challenging for you. So the biggest obstacle you'll ever face is yourself. As long as you don't quit, life will not knock you down, or it may knock you down, but you decide to get back up, and you keep getting up. So it's not quitting in the face of obstacles. And listen, some of you say, I want you to start thinking about this now. Talk to your teachers about this. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay? These things are all connected. I'll explain some more if you want to ask me some questions about that too. But you don't get to the point where you can go live in space by doing things that are easy. You don't get to the point where you can fly jets 3 times the speed of sound, or where you can do surgery on very small parts of the human body and know that that person's going to be okay when you're done. You don't get to the point where you can design really special machines that can keep the lights in a building on or keep the air at a comfortable temperature. If you want to work in the science and technology field, you're going to have to push yourself to be the best you. And it means getting comfortable being uncomfortable. The first day I sat in calculus class, I was very uncomfortable. But I'm glad I stayed in until the end. The next one is being a lifelong learner. And that is taking the things you learn in the classroom, but also connecting them with what you learn here in your community. These great museums. It's learning in your church, in your youth programs, at the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA, and combining all of that stuff into what you walk around with in your head, in your heart, and what you can do with your hands. You learn some skills, you learn some things, and you put them together, and you train your heart, and that's what you walk around with it. Being a lifelong learner is appreciating both the in the classroom piece, but also out in the real world, and combining that education. And one thing there are apps for it. You can jump online and find free language training, but learn a foreign language. I don't care which one. It doesn't matter which one, because statistics show it's good for your brain. If you can think and communicate in multiple languages, you generally are going to do better in school. And here's something to consider. How many of you have one of these? How many of you have one of these? A computer or a smartphone or a tablet? Everybody here should be raising both hands. What language do they speak?
English, like any language.
You can make it speak English or Spanish or French or Paruski. They all speak one language though. Did you know this? Listen. I'm going to give you a really important secret. They speak math. They speak math. Computer programming is very specific mathematics. And so, I encourage you, coding. Any of you take coding in school? Yes. Keep doing that. Because for every one of you walking around with one of these, you should also know how they work. And they speak math. Coding is very specific math. And I would include that as a foreign language. That is let you down. So speak, learn, get fluent in mathematics, okay? And hey, because you guys are still in school, teachers, parents, the power of reviewing, if you can just take 5 minutes to 10 minutes a day in every class that you're in, and maybe at your level you're in one class all day or one or two, when you get to high school, you're going to be in 5 or 7 classes, and in college, you might be in a different class every day, every hour. If you can just take 5 minutes a day to 10 minutes in review, one important thing for me in college, I had to do that because my handwriting is terrible. So if I took notes for a whole semester, and then I went back to study my notes at the end, I might not have been able to read my own handwriting. That would be bad, wouldn't it? So if you take 5 to 10 minutes to review everything that you're learning on a daily basis, you can make sure that you can read your own work. But more important than that, you get into a habit of making sure that you understand what you think you understand. And if you don't understand it, I wrote that down, but I still don't get it. What do you think you should do? Ask the teacher. So you show up to class at the beginning and you say, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, I have a question from yesterday. And you're already prepared instead of waiting until it's time to get ready for the test. That review can be the difference between we probably waste 5 to 10 minutes just scrolling through, just doing this with our thumb on these things. So I bet you have time. Being a lifelong learner. And the last one, being a good teammate. Like I said to you earlier, we need your generation to get us out of some of the mess that my generation has got us in. And one important aspect of that is by you being good to each other. And one of the important things that I need you to take away from this is being good to each other doesn't always mean that you agree with everything or agree with each other. It's okay to disagree. We don't all have to agree on the same things, but we can still treat each other with respect. If your teachers have talked to you about civility, etiquette, those might seem, people use the term soft skills when they say those things. I don't think those are soft skills. Those are the skills that sometimes create the big conflicts that we use our hard skills to fix. So those are important. And I know at your age, your parents are probably making you say please and thank you. And those are small examples of how to practice etiquette and how to be civil, how to be nice to each other. Those are some of the most important things that you will learn at your age. Continue to do them and continue to practice them so that when you're my age, you continue to do so. So being a good teammate is one very important thing I want you to walk away from this with, okay? That is maybe the most important of these 3 things. So repeat after me. What I want you to do? Be resilient.
Be resilient.
Be a lifelong learner.
Be a lifelong learner.
And be a good teammate.
And be a good teammate.
Because we are counting on you. Thank you very much. And I think at this point, we can do some questions.
So it is now time for my favorite part of the show, Q&A. So, but the thing is, I misplaced my questions.
Wait a minute. I think I've got some things here. These Q&A.
Hey, how'd you get those?
It's two-sided. There's a lot of questions. Wait a minute. Got some more. You want all those?
Thank you, thank you. So my first question, Victor, is why do you have so many pockets on this flight seat? And how many do you have?
Well, let's see. Count them. Can we count them up? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2 pockets. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 pockets. So why do we have so many? In airplanes, you might need to take checklists, publications with you, maps, other hardware, and so when you're sitting in the cockpit, it's important that you have pockets that you can access easily. So they tried to locate them so that you could use them while you were flying. And that's why we have so many.
Thank you. This next question comes from an 11th grader from Alabama at Baker High School. What extracurricular skills and knowledge do you think future astronauts will need to further explore the moon and make it to Mars?
Great question. What was the name? Was there a name?
There was no name for this.
Okay, that is a great question. And listen, my answer is all of them. What extracurricular activities do astronauts need to have? All of them. If you like gardening if you like puzzles, if you like math, if you like sports, all of those things are going to matter. Exploring other planets is going to take mental, physical, and emotional and spiritual toughness. So all of those things that you're engaged in now that you consider extracurricular activity, music. Hey, listen, when we go to another planet, we're going to be there for a long time. We're on the way there and back for a long time. Do you know how long it takes to get to Mars? With current propulsion technology, if we took a trip to Mars in the near future, how long would it take? Sir, what's your name? What's your name? Carlos? How long would it take us to get to Mars? How long? That's about how long a mission might be. 2 years. Because the trip, just one way, when we would launch, because obviously Earth is moving and Mars is moving, when we would launch, it would take 6 to 9 months to get there. We would stay there for a good period of time, and it would take 6 to 9 months to get back. So I say that because it's going to be really important that we connect with our families and talk to our loved ones, but it's also going to be important that we take pieces of our life here on Earth. How many of you like music? Games. We're going to need those pieces of our culture. So extracurricular activities, if they're healthy and productive, I think all of them are going to be important. Learning a foreign language, like I talked about earlier, taking care of your body, eating healthy in sports, especially team sports. I don't think there's one extracurricular activity out there that is not good. If you're into something like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, scouting teaches you lots of different things, from how to tie knots, engineering, and the different types of engineering. Those are all great extracurriculars.
Awesome, thank you. How are you all training and preparing for the Artemis missions where you are going back to the moon?
So we are going back to the moon, and when we've been before, and that program was called Apollo, and now we're going back to the moon to stay, and our program is called Artemis. And so Artemis is in its early stages. We're developing the hardware to go back to the moon. The big rocket that you may have heard was out there on the launch pad, and then we've got a spacecraft, Orion. The rocket is called SLS, the Space Launch System, and we're working on a lunar lander to be able to get us from lunar orbit, circling around the moon, to landing on the surface. And our partner SpaceX, we're working on turning Starship into a moon lander. And then there's also an outpost near the moon that will be like a space station that we're calling the Lunar Gateway. And all those pieces are being developed or built now. And so we are starting, our training is really now working with those companies to help make sure that hardware works for the people who are going to be living it. But we also are starting to put together the plans for the actual training programs when we assign those crews. And they're going to have to do some of that same stuff that we saw there. There may be language training because the crews could be international. There will be systems training, like we studied International Space Station systems. There will be rocket systems, spacecraft systems, lunar lander systems. We're going to have to focus on geology and studying our Earth, because that's the basis for the science that we're going to use when we study the moon, those processes that have happened up there. And so spacewalking, we'll spacewalk on the moon, but on the moon, on space station, did you notice how we moved around? We used our hands because we're floating. On the moon, we have 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, which means I can dunk from the free throw line like Michael Jordan. I can jump really high and far. And so on the moon, we will actually be able to walk them, or hop if you've ever seen them do spacewalks on YouTube or something. And so we will do spacewalks, but they'll be different than ISS. And so we will start training for what we call lunar surface EVAs, or extravehicular activities, spacewalks. There's lots of training coming up, and most of it is in the early stages, so we're just starting.
Thank you so much. This next question comes from a 5th grader from Bunker Hill Elementary. What is the most fulfilling moment of your career so far?
Wow, that's a big one. The most fulfilling moment of my career so far. Wow. I have to say, landing from that mission. Once we were safely in the water and they pulled us out of the capsule, there was a camera there, and I looked over at that camera and smiled and gave a thumbs up. That moment for me was important because I knew my family was watching, and they were, they wanted to know, is he okay? And so I knew that was the moment that they would see me and go, all right, he's safe on Earth. They can finally relax. And so that was a really special time, because for 168 days, something could have gone wrong at any moment. And so my family was always, he's good and I'm happy, but I'm also a little nervous because he's in space. And space is very dangerous. So landing and completing that mission successfully.
I feel the same way when I land from just an air flight, so I understand completely. Well, not completely, but this next question comes from my 4th grader from Stokes Elementary. Did you faint a lot during training or while in space?
Good question. Good question. I would want to know that too. That's your question? What's your name? Aiden? Good question. No, I didn't faint during training. I didn't faint in space. And I didn't faint when we got back. I'm curious. That might be something we really have to think about. If somebody did faint, that would be something really important to understand. I was the pilot of our spacecraft. So if I fainted, that could have been really bad, you know. Something interesting, though, about fainting, when you come back from space, your heart pumps blood through your body, right? And it has to pump against gravity. Some of your blood goes down, but some of it goes up, and your heart has to work really hard. When you go to space, you're weightless, and so your heart doesn't have to work as hard, and so it starts to relax. You don't control it, it just happens naturally. And so when we come back from space, we have to make sure astronauts don't faint. And so we do a test. I wish I could show you the video. They made me sit in a chair and then stand up and then just stand there for a long time to make sure my blood could my heart could pump blood to my brain, and I would stay conscious. And then they made me lie down on the floor, completely flat, and then stand up. Now this is the day I landed. This was right after I got back, so this was really hard. I had to stand up and stand there just to make sure that I wouldn't fall over. So it is important to make sure astronauts don't faint. But no, none of us fainted, and I didn't faint through any of those phases. Good question.
So this next question, and we have time for 3 more questions. This next question is a dual question, all related to exercise. The first part is, when you exercise in space, do you have a choice of the machines you use?
Okay.
And how difficult was it to maintain muscle mass while in space? And this comes from a 4th and 5th grader at Payne Elementary School in Washington, D.C., and a 10th grader from Bishop McNamara High School here in Maryland.
Very good question. Very good question. I said exercise is one of my favorite things in space. And so we have 3 exercise devices that we use on a regular basis, and they are the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, the thing we use to simulate lifting weights. You can't lift weights because we're in weightlessness. So it has a vacuum system that we pull resistance against this vacuum tube, and that allows us to do resistive exercises, like lifting weights. And that is probably my favorite one. If I could have used that all the time, I would have just done the strength training. But we also had 2 cardiovascular exercise devices. One was a treadmill. We call it T2. It's the second version of the treadmill we've flown in space. And the other one was Cebus, the bike that you saw Soichi riding, the bike that doesn't have a cedar handlebar. And so every day you're scheduled for 2 exercise devices, the strength training and then one of those cardio devices. But some days I didn't feel like riding the bike and putting on the shoes and clipping in. I just wanted to run and put on my running shoes, put my harness on, and bungee me down to the treadmill. And so I did have a choice. Most of us we did resistive exercise every day, but then we would be able to choose. As long as one of our crewmates wasn't using the other device, we could use the device even if that's not the one that we were scheduled for. Muscle mass. 2 things that you will lose a lot of in space if you're not careful are muscle mass, and one reason is because I weigh 200 pounds. So just standing up right now, I'm exercising my muscles and my bones. And when you're in space for 6 months, I don't hold my weight up because I'm floating. And so my muscles will naturally atrophy because I'm not using them. Atrophy just means to shrink, essentially. Well, my bones do the same thing for lots of different reasons, but also because we're not loading them up. But so some important things that we do to prevent muscle and bone loss are the strength training. The strength training is the #1 thing. We also take vitamin supplements, and we also keep our salt low. Because while we're in space, we have a condition called osteopenia. Osteopenia is when we lose bone mass. We lose calcium out of our bones. And salt increases the amount of calcium that you leach out of your bones. And so that's very similar to a condition that happens on Earth called osteoporosis. And so what we've learned in helping astronauts combat osteopenia are things that help people that suffer from osteoporosis on Earth. And so that is a very important thing that we've learned from spaceflight. But yeah, exercise helps us prevent bone and muscle loss.
Thank you for that. I think you're going to love this next question. It's about food. What was yours? I'm sorry, my apologies. I was surprised to see a variety of food available to eat in space. What's restricted and how do you decide what to take up with you? This comes from an 11th grader at Brentwood High School in Missouri.
Very good question. See, people usually say, what's your favorite food? But this is really good. So the food that we send to space, it has some requirements. First of all, we have a food laboratory that makes food specially for these missions. And it has a standard menu of choices, beef, chicken, pastas, shrimp. Some of it is dehydrated and we add water, hot or cold, to add moisture back to it. Some of it is normal the way it is, like dehydrated apricots and things. And some of it is irradiated or thermal stabilized, where you just open it up and there's a piece of chicken or cubes of beef in a sauce and you just warm it up before you eat it. Tomato basil soup, I ate a lot of tomato basil soup. And so all of those things, though, they have to be in packaging that is safe to be on the space station. And they also have to be able to stay on the shelf in boxes and packaged up for years. And that's the big one. So we also can go to the store and find things that we like and ask NASA to box those up and send up a portion of our food as things that we chose. And so some of that crew preference food, they grab the packaging and look at how it's stored and sealed and make sure that it meets those requirements, that it has safe packaging. Like I can't fly a jar of pickles, right? Glass is not safe, and so, but if it's in plastic or something that it can survive a launch and then staying in space for a long time, that's one thing they check. And then they also check to make sure, because I launched in November, but my food had been up there for almost a year. They had to launch it when they had a chance to send cargo up to the space station, and we can't just send things all the time, so we have to schedule it. So some of the food goes up there and it stays there for years. And so, have any of you ever been camping? Did you take special food when you went camping? Things like beef jerky, nuts, dried fruit. Those are things that last for a long time. Or like pickles, pickled okra. Those are things that are being preserved and they last for a very long time. And so we have to make sure that our food meets certain safety and quality standards. And so, yeah, that's a really good question. I don't get asked that a lot.
I thought so as well.
Very
now,
good.
Time for the last question.
All right.
In 30 years, space travel looks like what?
You. Space travel looks like you in 30 years. I can say a lot about machines and missions and where we're going, but the most important thing I can say to that is that space travel in 30 years looks like you. And that is maybe the most important mission that I have, is to make sure that that's the case. So thank you.
Let's give Mr. Brenda another round of applause. We want to thank all of you who are here with us, Bancroft Elementary School, Bunker Hill Elementary School, and Stokes Elementary School. Thank you for being here. And also, we want to say goodbye to our visitors who have joined us virtually on the camera. So let's say goodbye, and we will see you all next time.
Adios. Adios. Bro,